Warming up properly doesn't only improve your performance, but also drastically reduces the risk of injury. In this video, we're going to cover all aspects that you need to know to warm up properly for your next Hyrox race. Now, before we dive into the actual warm-up routine, let's start with some additional considerations. First of all, you always want to arrive to the venue early. That means 60 to 90 minutes before your race starts. That should give you enough time to spot where the warm-up area is, what equipment is available, and how many people are there warming up. Don't freak out if your legs feel heavy. This could very well be due to the pre-race performance anxiety and not necessarily due to residual fatigue from the training, especially if you have done right during the taper, as we recommend you in the video up here. Another thing to keep in mind is that you don't freak out and stay calm if the equipment you expect to be in the warm-up area isn't necessarily there. There are always other ways and alternatives to achieve the same result. Remember, we're just warming up here. The main goal is to get some blood flowing, elevate the body temperature, and making sure all the movement and the running is feeling good. Set a countdown timer from the start of the race for the length of your warm-up routine, either on your watch or on your smartphone, because that way you don't have to do any mental gymnastics to figure out how far away you are from your race start. Then, as a general consideration for warm-ups, there's a protocol we like to follow, the RAMP protocol. RAMP is an acronym for Race, Activate and Mobilize, and Potentiate. Each warm-up should cover these 3 or 4 aspects. We would recommend to take around 45 minutes. As I said, that might change based on individual needs and preferences, maybe also on the surroundings where you're competing at. If you're competing in a very cold venue, you might want to have a bit more warm-up, and if you're competing in a rather hot environment, you might not need as much warm-up. Let's say we aim our warm-up for 45 minutes. And the first thing we do is we start with a cyclical warm-up, a slow jog, or a row, a ski and a bike, depending on what is available. The ideal scenario here would be a mix of everything. So let's say you start on the bike and you start with 3 to 4 minutes of easy biking. After that, you can transition into a slow jog and mix in some light rowing and some light skiing. The idea here though is to keep the intensity very, very light. So keep in mind, this is a warm-up. You haven't done anything prior to this point other than maybe falling out of bed and walking to the venue. So really give yourself some time to raise your heart rate and your body temperature and get the muscles a bit loose. Once you have finished your cyclical warm-up, which took you around 10 minutes, you still have 35 minutes left. The next thing we're going to do is activate and mobilize. And here we have a small mobility routine that could be working just right for you, or you might want to mix in some of your favorite exercises to prepare the specific needs you have. If mobility is a big concern for you, we have a video specific for Hyrox mobility that you will find up here. Usually the mobility routine takes around 10 to 12 minutes. That means we have another 23 to 25 minutes left for warming up. The next thing we're going to do is we get a lot more specific towards the actual movements of the race. That means we're in the ramp phase of our warm-up now. The important thing here is, as the intensity of the warm-up increases, so should your rest. That means we're going to do some harder running, some harder rowing, some harder skiing, and you should take your time between these efforts. One thing we would recommend here as a generic warm-up would be 1 minute of running, starting at a slightly faster pace than your warm-up pace, building into a faster pace that is not necessarily your race pace, but a bit underneath. And then you go into 1 minute of ski, also at a harder pace that gets closer and closer towards your actual race pace. Then you have a big rest, let's say 2 minutes, and we repeat the same thing and do it with the row this time. That means you build your speed on the run again over the minute, and then you go into the row and do the same thing there. After that, you could follow with a second circuit of this at higher paces, so you actually mimic the race pace you will gonna have on that particular day. Keep the rest rather long, that we have a 1-to-1 work to rest ratio. You don't want to make yourself tired, you just want to prepare and ramp up for the actual race. Next, we will be spending some time preparing the actual movements of the race. What you go first with here depends a bit on the availability in the warm-up area. That means if the sleds are already used by someone else, then we might want to start with the burpee broad jumps. Here we would recommend doing 4 to 6 repetitions for 1 to 2 sets, depending on how good your mobility is and how much time you need to ease into the burpee broad jump. The important thing here with the burpee broad jump is that you follow the exact guidelines and rules as you would see them in the rule book. Now that we have our burpees prepped, we will do something for our posterior chain so we're able to pick up these kettlebells and prep our grip a bit. So here we would recommend 3 to 5 deadlifts with the kettlebells you are going to be using in the race, plus 10 to 20 meters of farm rest walking. The next would be the sandbag lunges and the wall balls. Here we would recommend 10 to 15 repetitions of each, just to get a feel for the movement. And again, we have tutorials for these movements as well, you will find them here. As I said in the beginning, this is also a good opportunity to test the sleds, as the sleds at the race might feel very different from what they will feel like in training. Here it's important to stay calm and maybe try out the different techniques that we're showing you in this video up here to see which works the best for you. As I told you already many times, with the REM phase we really want to take our time and want to have larger rests in between the particular exercises and stations. Let's say this took us 10 to 15 additional minutes. That means we're 10 minutes now from the race start. The final thing we're going to do is we want to run some strides to really prep our running, because this will also be the first thing that we're going to do in the actual race. Here we would recommend 2 to 3 reps of 100 to 150 meters at your race pace or even slightly faster. We would recommend something between 60 to 90 seconds of rest between these reps. Once you have finished these, you are ready for your race. Okay, we hope that this information was useful for you, and if you have any questions, drop us a comment down below. Goodbye and see you in the next one.